Hello, my name is Denise Lee, the creator of this communications course. This course was designed specifically for business students to learn about communication. There are units in this communications course, 6 units that are also sold separately as units. So if you aren't interested in buying an entire course, you could purchase one of the separate units. So let me dive into this rather extensive lesson library for a communications course. As you can see, it is extensive, but it is just enough information for a semester. There's a lot to cover in a business communications course. What I had to do was really vet the National Business Education Standards and pick out the lessons that I felt were most important for my students to learn, because there is no way that you could cover everything in the communication standards for the National Business Education Association, as they are very robust standards. But I did pretty well in covering all of the highlights so that our students are prepared for the workforce and for especially those employment documentations. The very first unit in this lesson library, first let me talk about the infrastructure. You can see here that I have put an asterisk in this yellow message beside any resource that I recommend being taught as student-led instruction. If you know anything about courses or resources by Denise Lee, you know that I love to create resources that are for student-led instruction. I will link a video on student-led instruction. It's actually linked here in this course. But if you go on YouTube and you search student-led instruction, I'm one of the top results. You can see what I mean by not teaching to PowerPoint, but really offering an opportunity for students to research and report back to the class. Any lesson in this lesson library that is really meant for student-led instruction, I put an asterisk beside. And that's a lot of the lessons. Some of them are jobs where they will be working for several days on a job. And some of them are activities where we get the kids out of their seats and moving around and hands-on. You can see that the units are here on the left-hand column. The second column is the student copy. That is what you would send to your learning management system. And then the teacher's key is the next column. Some of them are not teacher's keys. They are good student examples as students are creating and being creative. And so there's not a set teacher's key. I also give an expected time or a pacing guide, as well as the National Business Education Standards listed. For each of the units, I list all the standards for that unit. You'll notice that I don't list all the standards for a specific lesson, but as teachers, we are our own pedagogical engineers. You will be able to align those lessons. The reason I didn't do that is because some of the standards are hit in multiple lessons. So I did list all of the ones that are covered, though, in the unit off to the right-hand column. You'll see that the very first unit is active listening. I can't stress enough how important I feel that active listening is for our students. And there are some really awesome activities on active listening. Here I am going to show you one of the files, and this file is really walking the students through several different careers, all facets of careers, and how listening is important in each of these professions. It's important to me that I linked careers as much as I could in this resource bundle. You'll also notice that I have here the 7 C's of effective communication. And the students are going to learn the nuts and bolts of, in our next section, basic communication process and types of communication. When I'm doing a lesson like the 12 types of communication, this is a perfect opportunity for student-led instruction. And this is when I would, if I have a class of 24 students, assign one number to a pair of students, or if you have 12 students, one to each student, or however you want to divide it up, and have the students use the vetted resource links. They are all flattened, so students cannot copy and paste, and report back to the class. I will give them a period of time, and they are responsible for getting the information to the students in the class. This is an opportunity for students to speak up, speak slowly, accurately, and repeat themselves if needed. But it's also a great exercise for students to use their active listening skills as other students are reporting to the class. I think this is a very important component in a communications class. You'll notice that there are not necessarily one specific unit on speaking, verbal speaking, and verbal communication, because that is riddled all throughout this course. Every unit has an opportunity for students to present, to speak out in class, and sometimes literally do a formal presentation. After the basic communication, you'll notice that there is a very robust technology and communication unit. It was very difficult for me to pick lessons to narrow down because this is such a big part of now communication. But I love to introduce students to communication tools that are great for organization. So you'll see that this is one on Google Keep. And I also included a very comprehensive project. This is a Google productivity activity for students. It walks the students through Dawn's entrepreneurial journey and how she uses all types of tools, Google tools, for her organization in her classroom. If you are not a Google school and you do not use Google, you'll see that these have graphics that help students walk through this. If you are a Microsoft school, there are also projects in this very extensive file for exclusively Microsoft as well. Going down the professionalism and etiquette, you will see that I am hitting on correcting bad employee behavior, tips for communication etiquette in the workplace, code of conduct, and students actually have to write in this communications course a code of conduct for their classroom. Those were always interesting for me to read when the students wrote those. And then different mediums and career connection. Again, using examples of how this etiquette would be used in the business world or in careers. Written communication is also a very comprehensive unit as well. It's comprehensive because there's so many different things I wanted to cover in the written communication. Students are walked through, of course, the types of written communication and then the types of business writing. They also are creating a collaborative Google slide or PowerPoint with their classmates and having an opportunity to present on that aspect. They're learning about employee handbooks, business reports, rules for email etiquette. There is a lot on email etiquette, as well as explaining CC and BCC, courtesy copies or carbon copies, and blind carbon copies as well. And you will see that there's also how to write a formal business letter and plenty of opportunities for them to exercise their skills in writing these business letters. The students are also prompted to format a memo to the employees in the office, and they also are doing a gallery walk on several different types of written communication. Probably my very favorite in this entire file is that productivity, Google productivity. The last unit is probably one of the most important, although I think everything in this course is so important, and that is on employability skills. The employability unit looks like it isn't as long as the others, but it's actually just as long. The files are a little more robust, and I will show you here in this particular file. This is the job search and hiring process. This file is 21 slides. It took my students about 2 weeks to complete this, 10 class periods, and the periods were 42 minutes long. Now they are starting their search, then they're exploring the job search. They are then dropping a job that they found there by literally putting a screenshot or a snip. And then they're preparing a resume. Their resume content, they're going to be discussing resume format. You can see here they're then preparing a cover letter, the body of their cover letter, submitting an application. And yes, they're actually going to complete an application. There are job interviews, and they are going to go over some job interview tips, as well as a web quest on searching common interview questions. And then they're going to think of some questions to ask the interviewer, and here a follow-up, a thank you letter email where they're actually going to be completing that email. We're even going to address background checks once they get the job in this particular file, and how to prepare for a background check. And as we end with considering job offers, and then even a file on, if you decline the job, how to do a decline, how to respectfully decline a position if offered a position. After that very robust 2-week deep dive into the job search process, students then do a job quest. This is a job quest, the high school hustle, and it's a simulation where they are preparing, again, all the facets and the steps of the process of getting a job. I'm very, very proud of this file, and my students always found this to be probably one of the most beneficial projects in the entire course. There's also some great opportunities for students to create PowerPoints or Google Slides, professional slideshows, and they're learning about really those rules of developing and designing slideshows so that they are going to be successful in the workforce. There's also some great fun things. This is the Google version, and this is the Microsoft version, because they are very different. You can choose to do both, but if you're a Google school, Microsoft school, they are both there for you on a Friendsgiving dinner event. It doesn't even have to be a Friendsgiving. It can be really any event. But you can see here students in the Googles using Google Keep, Google Calendar, Google Docs, and Google Slides. And I also give graphics so that students can be successful in this project. They also get to create a tablescape, and my students loved doing that. And in the Microsoft file, they are exploring Microsoft Lists, Microsoft Calendar, Microsoft Word, and Microsoft PowerPoint. Again, some of the organizational tools that I think all students should be learning. And those are down here under the seasonal activities. There's also a wonderful holiday market communications activity that my students loved, and an opportunity to create social media posts in this communications course. I also have a couple sub-day survival lessons, because, sometimes that is a win whenever we are looking for something on a day we didn't expect to be out. Thank you so much for thinking of me for your educational resources and supporting my small business. Again, I am Denise Lee, the teacher author of this business communication course, and I'm pretty proud of this work.